Well, now, in just over half an hour, that's at 6 o'clock, Clifford Evans will be introducing Sing to the Lord today from the Methodist Church, Conway Road in Cardiff. First, though, let's visit Cambridgeshire as we join Paul Barnes and Portrait of a Village.
Houghton got its name because long ago someone decided to make a mountain out of a molehill. In the flatlands of one-time Huntingdonshire, any sort of a rise in the landscape was worth calling a hill. There was a bit of a mound near here. In Old English, the word for hill was hoe. At the foot of the hoe was a farm, a tun, and so Houghton immortalizes an ancient claim. The hill doesn't dominate the village. St Mary's does, or at least its 14th century spire. The Anglican faith was predominant, but a nonconformist challenger was born in the shadow of the spire at the tail end of the 18th century. He was buried there too, after an energetic span of 73 years. This is Mr. Potto Brown, perhaps the most famous son of Houghton, born in 1797 in a house just along the street here. He was born into a Quaker family, and that rather odd Christian name of his actually stems from the maiden name of his mother. He went to Huntingdon Grammar School, a rather slow learner by all accounts, not good at multiplication or at writing or reading. But his slowness was a disguise for a good deal of acumen. He was very keen on business. In fact, he used to go day after day to the chapel and actually pray to be good at business and making money. He even used to take the ledgers for God to give him the once-over. Like a good many Quakers, he actually did fall out with the order in time and became an independent and ultimately a Congregationalist. And he's here now for evermore, keeping an eye on another of his gifts to the community, the nice Gothic pump right in the middle of the square. Odd that it should be so decorative, given the simple nature of Potto's chosen faith and his thrifty approach to business. Something penny plain might have been more in keeping. It's been years since it quenched a thirst. Water's on tap now and the pub's just over the way. There's no pavement, not much call really, now there's a bypass. The trippers take refreshment at the edge of what used to be the main road between Huntingdon and St Ives, a dog's leg which with today's traffic would have become a death trap. It's the road to Houghton too, another village a mere 200 yards round that corner. The two add up to one, as farmer Harry Anderson told me. One of the things I've got to get used to, of course, Harry, is actually calling the place by its proper name. Not Houghton, but Houghton.
Oh, it's, yes, to call it Houghton's real swearing, you know. Yes, yeah. When I was at school, on the blackboard that was left permanently at the top was Houghton, H-O-T-O-N, and Whitton, W-I-T-T-O-N.
So the correct pronunciation was drummed in from an early age.
Yes, it was.
Yeah.
Yes.
The two villages, of course, are very much sort of interlocked, you know, like hands.
Yes, I think for the last, since the war, it's one village. Houghton and Whitton is one village, but it never used to be quite like that. I remember a ladies' cricket match would be in the 30s, I think, and there was a dispute when Houghton was playing Whitton over the scores, and it got out of hand a bit. My father had to step in quick and stop and fight.
Well, there was brawling between Houghton and Whitton.
Yes, real bit of needle in it.
What was the subject of the brawl?
I think one side accused the other of cheating, and it snowballed from there, I think.
But to all intents and purposes now, though, Houghton and Whitton are, in a sense, one and the same place.
Oh, yes, one village, yes. It's Houghton and Whitton. Mm. If you come in from one end, the sign says Houghton and Whitton. If you come in from the other end, it says Whitton and Houghton.
Oh, and so honour is satisfied.
Oh, yes.
Where, though, do the twain actually meet? Where does this interlock actually occur?
There is a dividing line of a stable at Rectory Farm. Well, it used to be a farm, but it isn't anymore. And The old saying went that the horses used to eat in Houghton and dung in Whitton.
Doubtless a native of Whitton is sure to turn the horses round when he tells the story, though Harry does confess that he can recall the nag standing parallel to the boundary ditch. Oberon is Harry's prize-winning Charolais bull, bred on the farm, the pride of the place, though she's probably biased. At 3, he's 388 years younger than the farm itself. The present manor farm is built on the site of the original tun, from which Houghton got its name. As the years have passed, Manor Farm has become marooned by development as Houghton's grown. The pasture where the 50 or so Frisians graze has been pushed farther and farther away, and so twice a day the cows amble patiently through the village to and from the parlour at milking times. They often share their promenade with dozens of visitors. Weekdays aren't so bad, but beware the bank holidays, say the locals. The road to the mill sometimes seems more like Petticoat Lane. The not-so-nimble could be trampled underfoot in the rush to enjoy a quiet English scene. It's worth a frame or two on a roll of film, one of the oldest survivors along the River Ouse, Houghton Mill. This isn't the original, though. Most of this building is a mere brat of 200 years or so. The records show that there's been a mill here for at least 1,000 years. This one stopped work in 1930, and 4 years later became a youth hostel. It's owned by the National Trust, who lease it to the YHA. It's uniquely accessible, which makes it attractive from some points of view, but for Billy Chapman, the warden, it's a bit of a trial.
It's an absolute menace. It's the only hostel in Britain with a public right-of-way between the kitchen and the dining room. And there you are, you're ready with all the suppers. You've got all the suppers on one side, you've got all your hungry hostlers on the other, and then just at that moment the riding stables come through, or a load of tourists come through, or the local fishermen come through with all the angling equipment.
And so a hot supper actually can go cold in the process.
Yes.
What do you tend to serve up for meals?
It's a 3-course meal served at 7 o'clock. It's soup of whatever variety is the order of the day. Beef pie, carrots, vegetables, potatoes, gravy. Always a pudding, whichever, according to season. Tonight it's rhubarb and custard.
Not exactly cordon bleu then, but good, substantial fare, the sort of thing that cyclists
it's very,
and
very,
walkers
very
need.
cheap indeed.
Yeah.
And it's just the sort of meal that hungry hostlers want after they've cycled 20, 30, 40 miles or walked about 10 or 15 miles a day.
Now, what sort of people are they and where do they come from?
Practically everybody. Everybody from 5 upwards, and we had one the other week, 88, who'd cycled from Cambridge. From all walks of life, all nationalities, and one unique morning, I had 19 nationalities in for breakfast one morning.
Do you ever find it gets a bit too much insofar as you get far too many people in that you just can't cope?
Very often we have to turn people away.
And what happens to them then?
Well, then they can go and try if the other hostels have got accommodation for them.
So any youth hosteler must be prepared to have the occasional bit of bad luck and have to sleep out once in a while.
Well, if you're a wise hosteler, you book in advance.
Yeah.
And then you know that your bed is reserved for you. And anybody coming out unbooked at this time of the year knows then that they must take a chance.
And the other wise hostelers turn up just that bit early, like these people here?
Yes, these people here turn up just that bit earlier.
Well, I see them
to make sure.
Championing the gate. It's about time to let them in. Shall we do
Right,
that?
we will.
There are some who'd pay a lot to stay here, to be lulled by the sound of water rushing by and waking next day to the sight of the long, lazy river. All too often, though, it seems they endure the night-long twitter of the anglers' transistor radios.
Yeah. Mind you, it is, of course, late in the week, isn't it? So presumably circumstances are rather different. Here we are.
Good evening. Welcome to Houghton Mill. Who else? Good evening. Welcome to Houghton Mill. What country are you from?
From Holland.
You're from Holland? Right. Anybody else booking in at the mill tonight? No. Would you come this way then, please?
The mill isn't just an empty shell kept standing to help hostelers do England on the cheap. The machinery is still intact, most of it, viewing by appointment only. Overnight guests in Houghton aren't always hostelers. They're sometimes campers, and for those who like the comfort, there are the guest houses. This one used to be the Brown Teapot, well known to RAF types who were stationed at Houghton during the war. In fact, a lot of RAF types opted to stay when the war was over and make Houghton home. Houghton's like a wheel with 5 spokes, each of them a road. The hub is the green, which once really was green, but the clock looks down on tarmac now. The shelter beneath it was once the province of the elderly, who could sit and while away the hours dispensed by the hands above their heads. Maurice Scrivener runs the do-it-yourself store, and in a back room full of ticking, he mends clocks. Naturally, he's the man to keep the village clock properly wound. Even before the clock came to measure it out minute by minute, the house opposite had passed a lot of time. It's the oldest in the village.
Old Masters disappeared.
The butler?
No, Old Masters.
Oh, you mean those ghastly paintings?
No, damn it, Old Masters, those liqueur thingies.
Oh, the chocolate liqueurs. Don't worry, Henry. I'm sure they'll turn up.
Old Master Chocolate Liqueurs by Tobler.
Hello, John. We're all right here, mate. Campari. With of ice and a zhoosh of soda. Staggering, anything. The pre-prandial delights of cafe society. Shimmering at a mere arm's length. Stone me. Beautiful. The end of a perfect day.
Hey, Ron.
What is it, John? Luxuriating in its superbly bittersweet taste?
No, we're working in Penge tomorrow.
Cash flow from Lloyds Bank. It's a better way to manage your saving and spending. You'll know you can pay for the things you need immediately without asking your bank manager. With a cash flow account, you undertake to save regularly. And we'll pay you interest on any savings you build up. You'll get a credit limit and a special checkbook. Cash flow, one of the many advantages of banking at the sign of the Black Horse.
This is an assault course for cooking foils. Ordinary ones don't last long here. That's why they're using new Baco foil, because Baco foil has been made tougher, even tougher than it was before. New Baco foil, now even tougher.
This is the age of the time machine. Kodak extra cameras that can take you back days, months, or years, so you can enjoy that moment again and again. They're the most advanced machines Kodak have ever made, with built-in flash, telephoto lens, and easy refueling. This one has automatic flash that fires whenever you need it. You can revisit all your good times, or even go back just a few moments in time, with the only instant camera that can give you pictures in Kodak color with built-in flash. It comes with a free transporter. So give someone a Kodak time machine. Then have a good time and keep it. Keep it with Kodak.
Houghton and Whitton, just like fish and chips, bread and butter. And if Houghton needs a reminder that it's a partner in a duet, it looks up when the RAF sends a plane over. The connection between the village and the Royal Air Force is a friendly one, and the village has had occasion in the past to be grateful for it. For instance, in March 1947, Houghton found itself not on the Ouse, but in it. This was the spring which followed one of the worst winters of this century. The snow had thawed, and there was heavy rain too. The film, shot by one of the locals, shows the result, and the Air Force lads helping out. Every house in the village, bar one, was affected by the rising water, and some people had to be evacuated to accommodation on the airfield. Those who stayed were marooned for days in upstairs rooms and had to be supplied by boat. The chances of scenes like these ever being repeated are slender, because the Great Ouse River Board shortly afterwards established a clay dyke around the village. It runs parallel at one point to Thicket Road, overlooked by a grand, heavy house called the Elms. It was built in 1868 for Bateman Brown, son of Potto. It's been years since the tinkle of bone china and silver spoons was heard in the conservatory. Nowadays, the sounds of science pervade the old place. Mr. A.E. Churchill was a senior scientific officer at the government's poultry research station at Houghton. As Dr. Tony Churchill, he's in charge at the Elms. Tony Churchill moved from government research into private enterprise in order to manufacture and market a vaccine for the control of a virus infection in poultry, known as Marek's disease after the scientist who first described it. It's a form of paralysis which has been costing the poultry industry millions of pounds each year. Now the poultry industry is healthier, a fine old house has been saved, and there's work within walking distance for Houghton people. Just along Thicket Road, a few yards on from the Elms, you find the stables of Jane Benson. And where you find stables, you find inevitably crowds of young girls slavishly devoted to the welfare of horses. One or two boys are tolerated, but they're a male minority. Jane was horse-mad from the cradle, galloping round here on a broomhead as soon as she could walk. It was only a matter of time before her granddad bought her a foal for a £5.
Here you are, one of the luckiest girls in the county. All these horses to play with. How did it all start?
I started collecting ponies that were from the sales that were going for killing, and decided to just sort of save their necks, really. And I collected about 6 or 7 and found it very difficult to ride 6 or 7 horses every day. So the people in the village, the girls, asked me if they could ride. And they used to come up and help me groom the horses, catch them, etc. And originally, you can't let people pay for a ride without a licence, so Father says, why not get yourself a licence? So we wrote to the council, and we had a vet come out. You can't have your own vet, you have to have somebody independent.
Yeah.
And we got the vet from St Ives to come out and to do a stable inspection.
It's a curiously sort of sentimental way of starting the business, though, saving horses from slaughter. What made you do that? Because horsey people tend not to be sentimental, really.
Well, I think I am. I'm one of the probably few that, you know, when you see a nice youngster, about 18 months old, you know, the woman's done it out all nice, and then you see the meat man sort of pay £100 for it, and you know that it's going to end its days.
Tell me about the girls who come along. Are they all local?
Yeah, most of them come from the village. We've got a few that come from St Ives as well, but they're all here by about 8:30 on a Saturday morning, ready to help get the horses up and to groom and be ready for 10 o'clock.
All volunteers?
All volunteers, yeah. They do it for a couple of rides for a weekend.
I find that absolutely amazing that girls in particular are prepared to do this where horses...
Oh, they do it. They do anything for a free ride, I think. Only that, but they learn the experience, so that usually we find the older girls, they tend to learn quite a lot about the horses, the management, the feeding and the grooming and everything, and then they go out and buy their own horse.
Yeah.
So they ride that.
What are the sort of criteria that you adopt when you're choosing horses to bring them in here?
Well, something like Silver, he's about 15-2. He'll take about 11, 12 stone for the adults. And then you've got the smaller ones that will take the kids.
And of course, they've got to have the right frame of mind.
That's
too,
right, they've got to be very, very quiet. Yeah, bomb-proof, absolutely bomb-proof.
Although around here, I would have thought that the quality of being bomb-proof was not so important as it might be in an urban area, because there isn't much traffic.
No, the only thing we normally meet is buses, but most of our horses are right with buses anyway, and we don't go near many main roads at all. Just along round the village, then we go into the field and do some jumps.
What's good enough for Houghton today may be top at Hickstead tomorrow, or maybe the day after. The cricket pitch is only a good 6 away from Manor Farm, but Harry Anderson, cricket buff, reckons the occasional broken window a small price to pay for convenience. One thing which dawns after a short time in Houghton is the frequency with which one make of car tends to show up. The garage by the green is journey's end for MG lovers the world over. One reason they come here is for consolation, because they've been inclined to be a melancholy bunch lately, ever since the management of BL decided to end production of the mark in 1979 as part of their rationalisation. Rational thought is often low on the list of priorities for any enthusiast. To the MG person, it was sacrilege. So Sid Beer's place became more of a shrine than ever, with pilgrims by the thousand. He's got customers who bring cars from Europe for a 6,000-mile service and clock up 1,000 miles towards the next one in the process. The garage is overflowing with MGs and bits of MGs, new and old, and across the road he's got some more, perhaps the most comprehensive collection in the world. Sid Beer's ambition is to house the lot here, properly displayed in a museum. Then those who thirst for a sight of classic cars en masse can browse to their heart's content. A museum would be good news for the landlord here, accustomed already, I suppose, to MG chat. Funny to think that the mystical token on the radiator is simply the initial letters of a mundane-sounding enterprise called Morris Garages. While the museum remains a dream, visitors have to settle for whatever else the place has to offer.
Thank you very much. That should make for an interesting excursion.
At the back of the mill is Houghton's present greatest attraction, the River Ouse itself, and the chance to be an admiral for an hour for just a few bob. On a fine summer evening, there's some benefit to be had from simply being by the river, though there are some who prefer to be in it. You do find odd bathers inclined to be reluctant, overdressed as they are for the occasion, and the spectators think so too. But how's it possible to fall out of a stable little boat like that? A punt's different, especially if you chance using a pole instead of a paddle. But every year there's someone daft enough for a ducking and lucky enough to get away with it at the modest cost of squelching home wrapped in damp denims. Grass wouldn't stand a chance on the green now, car park as it is for the shops, and well-stocked shops they are too, even to an off-licence. Most people who come to visit Houghton tend to make a beeline for the mill and the river, which is all very well, but by doing that they deprive themselves of the sight of as charming a selection of houses as there is to be found in East Anglia. Some of them aren't very old, but their builders and their owners have had a regard for houses nearby which are, From Tudor to the 20s, the houses harmonise. That mutual regard is an extension of a generous nature which seems to exist here. People appear to be forthcoming to the point of embarrassment, not only with money but with time as well, whenever there are funds to be raised in the village or events organised for the benefit of the hard up and the sick, the old and the young.
Say goodbye.
All the ingredients are here, you might think, for an award. But for Houghton to be a best-kept village, say those who live here, is out of the question. Elements among the trippers and the campers, not to mention certain locals, have small regard for charm and history, and they leave their litter here each day to show it. Have a care for Houghton when you go.
And Paul Barnes presents another portrait of a village in 3 weeks at the same time, 5:30.
Put your finger on the button and see how quick it shoots. Give Polaroid for Christmas with a special touch of booze.